Chapter 3, Part 2. In the first part of this chapter, we encountered Wolf and we had the story from his point of view. Part 2 of the chapter goes back to Torak and what he is seeing and thinking. Torak was furious with himself. Why hadn't he killed the cub? Now what was he going to eat? The cub jabbed its nose into his bruised ribs, making him yelp. "Get off," he shouted, kicking it away. "I don't want you. Understand? You're no use. Go away." He didn't even attempt that in wolf talk, because he'd realised that he didn't actually speak it very well. He only knew the simpler gestures and some of the sound shapes. But the cub picked up his meaning well enough. It trotted off a few paces, then sat down and looked at him hopefully, sweeping the ground with its tail. Torak got to his feet, and the world tilted sickeningly. He had to eat soon. He cast around the river for food, but saw only the dead wolves, and they smelt too bad even to think about. Hopelessness washed over him. The sun was getting low. What should he do? Camp here? But what about the bear? Had it finished with Far and come after him? Something twisted painfully in his chest. Don't think about Far. Think what to do. If the bear had followed you, it would have got you by now, so maybe you'll be safe here, at least for tonight. The wolf carcasses were too heavy to drag away, so he decided to camp further upstream. First, though, he would use one of the carcasses to bait a deadfall, in the hope of trapping something to eat overnight. It was a struggle to set the trap, to prop up a flat rock on a stick, then slot in another stick crossways to act as a trigger. If he was lucky, a fox might come along in the night and bring down the rock. It wouldn't make good eating, but it would be better than nothing. He'd just finished when the cub trotted over and gave the deadfall an inquisitive sniff. Torak grabbed its muzzle and slammed it to the ground. "No," he said firmly, "you stay away." The cub shook itself and retired with an offended air. Better offended than dead, thought Torak. He knew he'd been unfair. He should have growled first to warn the cub to stay away, and only muzzle grabbed if it hadn't listened, but he was too tired to worry about that. Besides, why had he bothered to warn it at all? What did he care if it wobbled along in the night and got squashed? What did he care if he could understand it, or why? What use was that? He stood up, and his knees nearly gave way. Forget about the cub. Find something to eat. He forced himself to climb the slope behind the big red rock to look for cloudberries. Only when he got there did he remember that cloudberries grew on moors and marshes, not in birchwoods, and that it was too late in the year for them anyway. He noticed that in certain spots the ground was littered with wood grouse droppings, so he set some snares of twisted grass, 2 near the ground and 2 on the sort of low branch the wood grouse sometimes run along, taking care to hide the snares with leaves so that the wood grouse wouldn't spot them. Then he went back to the river. He knew he was too unsteady to try spearing a fish, so instead he set up a line of bramble-thorn fishing hooks baited with water snails. Then he started upriver to look for berries and roots. For a while the cub followed him. Then it sat down and mewed at him to come back. It didn't want to leave its pack. Good, Torak thought. You stay there. I don't want you pestering me. As he searched, the sun sank lower. The air grew sharp. His jerkin glistened with the misty breath of the forest. He had a hazy thought that he should be building a shelter instead of looking for food, but he pushed it away. At last he found a handful of crowberries and gulped them down. Then some late lingonberries, a couple of snails, a clutch of yellow bog mushrooms, a bit maggoty, but not too bad. It was nearly dusk when he got lucky and found a clump of pig nuts. With a sharp stick he dug down carefully, following the winding stems to the small, knobbly root. He chewed the first one. It tasted sweet and nutty, but was barely a mouthful. After much exhausting digging, he grubbed up 4 more, ate 2, and stuffed 2 in his jerkin for later. With food inside him, a little strength returned to his limbs, but his mind was still strangely unclear. What do I do next? He wondered. Why is it so hard to think? Shelter, that's it. Then fire, then sleep. The cub was waiting for him in the clearing. Shivering and yipping with delight, it threw itself at him with a big wolf smile. It didn't just wrinkle its muzzle and draw back its lips, it smiled with its whole body. It slicked back its ears and tilted its head to one side. It waved its tail and waggled its forepaws and made great twisting leaps in the air. Watching it made Torak giddy, so he ignored it. Besides, he needed to build a shelter. He looked around for deadwood, but the flood had washed most of it away. He'd have to cut down some saplings if he still had the strength. Pulling his axe from his belt, he went over to a clump of birch and put his hand on the smallest. He muttered a quick warning to the tree spirit to find another home fast, then started to chop. The effort made his head swim. The cut on his forearm throbbed savagely. He forced himself to keep chopping. He was in an endless dark tunnel of chopping and stripping branches and more chopping. But when his arms had turned to water and he could chop no more, he saw with alarm that he'd only managed to cut down 2 spindly birch saplings and a puny little spruce. They'd have to do. He lashed the saplings together with a split spruce root to make a low, rickety lean-to. Then he covered it on 3 sides with spruce boughs and dragged in a few more to lie on. It was pretty hopeless, but it'd have to do. He didn't have the strength to rainproof it with leaf mould. If it rained, he'd have to trust his sleeping sack to keep him dry and pray that the river spirit didn't send another flood because he'd built too close to the water. Munching another pig nut, he scanned the clearing for firewood, but he'd only just swallowed the pig nut when his belly heaved and he spewed it up again. The cub yipped with delight and gulped down the sick. Why did I do that? Thought Torak. Did I eat a bad mushroom? But it didn't feel like a bad mushroom. It felt like something else. He was sweating and shivering, and although there was nothing left in his belly to throw up, he still felt sick. A horrible suspicion gripped him. He unwound the bandage on his forearm, and fear settled on him like an icy fog. The wound was a swollen, angry red. It smelt bad. He could feel the heat coming off it, and when he touched it, pain flared. A sob rose in his chest. He was exhausted, hungry and frightened, and he desperately wanted fire. And now he had a new enemy. Fever. Well, that is the end to chapter 3. I hope you enjoyed that, and tune in for chapter 4.